Hello, everybody. I'm Melody Pash with Bridging Realms, and these are my partners and my team members, Jill and Darla. And we've got a very cool, very interesting dream today that I think you guys are really going to enjoy. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a good podcast. So glad that you are here. So I'm going to go ahead and read the dream like I always do, and then we will go from there. I got to do a little adjusting here. Sorry, folks. This my little lights going the wrong direction. There we go. I think we're okay. All righty. Okay. So this dream is called Five Frilly Dresses. So this is a really, really interesting dream. I think you guys are going to get a kick out of it. All right. So the dream took place in their childhood home. All righty. In their childhood home, there were 5 family members seated on the sofa in the living room. It was an aunt, 2 female cousins who are sisters, the dreamer's younger sister and herself, and they were each dressed in the same pretty frilly dresses with crinoline slips. Each of their dresses was the same style, but each was a different pastel color. The dresses were lavender, pink, yellow, blue, and green. The sofa they were seated on was facing the wall where the TV was located. To the right of the TV was the front door. The dreamer turned around on the sofa when she noticed 5 puppets, marionettes, on their strings, right? Being puppeted, being controlled, coming down the stairs toward the sofa. They frightened her so much that she began screaming and ran out the front door. That's a really interesting dream. And when I first heard about this dream, it was really interesting to me. And there's kind of a fun finale at the end that we'll throw in that will really get to you, because when God really wants to talk to you and really wants to get your attention about something, he knows how to do it. He really knows how to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and start with some of my notes on this dream. Let's start with the dream takes place in the family's childhood home. Now, this is going to be a clue that this is a generational aspect, and it's generational in nature. They're all there. All 5 of these women, the 2 sisters, the mother of the dreamer is not there, but the aunt and her 2 daughters, and then the 2 daughters that are the sisters' daughters, are all there. They're lined up along the sofa in their frilly dresses. Now, this is also going to represent, because it's in the childhood home, a specific time or timeline. And home here can also represent the family bloodline. That's where we get that clue. Girls, have anything you want to chime in on there before I go on? Nope, nobody's talking. Okay. All right. So there were 5 family members seated on the sofa in the living room. All right. Now, we know that 5 represents grace, but when you are interpreting dreams, you need to always be hearing from Holy Spirit in the context of what's going on in the scenario of the dream. So you can't always go to stock answers. So you need to be careful with that sometimes. So this is what I was seeing. 5 is also the number of all the fingers on your hand, which represent the whole hand or something the whole family has a hand in. They're in agreement with something that they all have their hand in. There's something there, some some tradition, something that they all have their hand in, they're all in agreement with, they're all approving of something that is going to wind up a corporate agreement through either deliberate or tacit, without knowledge, agreement, right? So they are all in agreement because it's all five of them. So if you're looking at the hand, what the hand is in, it's all of the hand. It's not just a few of them. It's not two or three. It's not four. It's everybody. Everybody. They all have their hand in it. They're all in agreement with whatever this scenario or this circumstance is. And they're also, there's a possibility that all of the women involved in this or these agreements, they remain seated together even to this day. So this is about a timeline, which we'll talk about later in the dream, but they are seated together in the family home, which means the past. But this dream is also speaking to present and future, right? So these women may remain seated together. In other words, their blood or their souls were all still in agreement and probably are still to this day. These agreements, again, whether deliberate or tacit, unknowing, are openly on display as well. And they're all dressed for display. They're all dressed to exhibit who they are, and what they're wearing is saying something about who they are and what's going on, almost like a celebration. They're all dressed very extravagantly. Ladies, you want to pop in there?
Well, were they all sitting on the sofa together? Does that suggest an equal authority as well? Or is that going to depend? Well, I know that there's more clues like the colors, but where they're all together and a couple of different generations, like you said, this is a bloodline thing, but yet they all have equal authority. Because isn't that where
Yes.
the seating?
Which also means they have an equal right or authority to the agreement. So each of their agreements, in other words, each of the five being in agreement, they each have the same level of authority individually. So yeah, you're right.
And responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Accountability. Yep.
This accountability. Mm-hmm. Oh, this is quite a mystery.
I know. I know. It's one of those dreams that carry the mysterion of God. It's kind of like there are lots of clues, but where are they going? Right?
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. So you're right, Darla. Absolutely. The being seated. Yeah. So they're and think of their individual authority also being over their own lives, right? Individually over their lives, but also that affects the family line and the timeline in which they are experiencing or present, right? Present to. So from the moment of their being raised in the family home to present or future, same thing. That authority is corporate and it's individual.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I was kind of thinking, it might also be kind of like a moment where, Holy Spirit visited the apostles. They were all in the same room together and they were waiting. Well, it's almost like this is, they're celebrating, but it's like, they were ready for this. They were dressed. That's pretty curious as to what the occasion was that prompted them to dress to their Sunday best, more or less,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
so it's interesting to see, that they came together in that moment. They're all sitting together. The TV's not on.
Nope.
What exactly was going on there. So yeah, it's very curious.
And stay there, Jill, and let's look at, they're all dressed like, when we were kids, we dressed like that for Easter Sunday,
Right.
right? Easter Sunday also introduces something that is hidden, which for the Jews is a hidden message, right? They hide the bread.
Oh,
They wrap it in a napkin. They hide the bread. Somebody has to find the bread, or they all have to find the bread. But we do our version of that with the Easter eggs, which are typically, not always, but oftentimes are pastel colors,
yes.
right?
Right.
And eggs represent fresh vision.
Oh, yeah.
Ah,
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what it felt like, because otherwise, kids don't normally dress up in their best, nor are
Right.
they sitting on a sofa for very long, so it's like
And they're not typically hanging out with the adults either.
no,
yeah.
no. So that was
I've been
very
out in the dirt.
Yeah.
right.
Well, it's interesting how this dream feels creepy, but yet you guys are bringing out some pretty positive elements and meanings here. This is
Right.
encouraging.
What if, now we're going to look at this on several levels, but what if the pastel colors, the colors of the dresses, also represent the eggs, which are vision, which belong to each woman individually, that hasn't yet been unwrapped?
Right.
Oh,
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah. That sounds really good. Yeah, it's like they're new in the spirit,
There
so
you
the
go.
the colors aren't as vibrant, and they're just beginning.
mm,
They're beginning their journey.
Hmm.
Ah, yeah,
It makes sense, doesn't it? So
yeah,
something has been birthed, but not yet hatched, not yet unwrapped. Isn't that the way God works with us, though? He puts something in us. He puts his seed of destiny and purpose in us, and it germinates, right? And then it begins to grow, and then it begins to flourish, and eventually it does bear fruit. Isn't that the way it works? The same with these eggs. Each one might represent, like the dresses might represent what's being unwrapped, what's part of their identity. And it was interesting. They all had the same style dress on, but none of them were the same color. I love that.
yeah. So that made each one unique in their own way because the colors are so different,
Yeah,
and
they're still
yet
individuals, right?
yes, but they're still dressed beautifully, that even though they're the same style, they're different because of the colors, and the colors represent different things. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And what if the styles of the dresses, because it is their dress or dressed or dressing, which is not only about attitudes, but what if it's also connected to their DNA. The reason they all look alike to some degree and a large degree is because they all carry the same bloodline DNA.
Yeah.
Do you sometimes wonder why this and not that? Like, instead of this being all different colors, it could have been a jewel tone, you know, and then like a jewel tone in a purple, and then the next one could have been a jewel tone in a slightly, well, kind of like our screen here, where the pink meets the blue, the purple, fuchsia. But
Right.
they could have all been different hues of the exact same color, you know, but
Yeah.
yet they have their own individual. So what you just said is that they're all together, but yet they all bring their own. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, so it can be a corporate family word, but let's also think about it as the corporate body as well. Now, interesting, because there are only females on the sofa.
Oh.
So I'm pretty sure God's addressing what's in the females in this bloodline, and the major clues, the outcome, or the reason why. The whys actually show up at the very end of the dream, which is very interesting.
All right.
Wow.
Makes
Well, now
it
I
kind
can't
of
wait to
fun.
get to the end of the dream.
Well, it sounds almost like this is the beginning of their journey. You know, it's come to the forefront. You know, like this is the time that that all of them are shown, all of them appear. So what is exhibited is a little bit of the fruit, whatever is in their DNA, you know, is
Right.
coming to the forefront. So they're just beginning their journey in their gifts. So they're just beginning to see the colors.
Absolutely. And of course, they're all going to have individual tone, right?
Yeah.
They're all going to have individual, they all have different minds, mindsets, thoughts. They get to make their own choices, but their DNA looks the same.
Wow.
So let's go on to the next part. So it's the aunt with her female, so her two daughters, which are cousins. So they're sisters, and then the dreamer's younger sister and herself. Okay, so we're seeing sisterhood repeated here. There's a repetitive message of sisterhood here. The room only has females in it at present, right? It only has females. And aunt's the sister of one's mother. Also, we see there are all females in the whole scenario. So the whole context of the dream, there are no males, which says to us that God is speaking to the corporate womanhood of this bloodline. So the females are the women in this bloodline, and the giftings that are in the women in this bloodline. That's what he's addressing here. So these are clues. Now, what are the women in the family, in this family, carrying that's got such substance? Something, right? Now, remember, they're all wearing a different color, so their giftings are not going to all look the same, but they will all overlap and be from the same tree, right? We're most likely observing a prophetic picture here in similar giftings. Again, you've also got to be looking at the timeline where they're there and they're seated together. But this, as you see, in the progression of the information, and I left it that way for a purpose. But the context of the dream is the timeline is actually expressed or actually uncovered later in the dream.
And then what you were talking about earlier with the hand, the grace, the fivefold with this. So is that like introducing the, obviously the spiritual gifting of each of these members
Absolutely.
as well?
Now,
Okay.
we're not talking about the fivefold here. That's not what's going on.
No?
No.
Okay.
No, but we're talking about their giftings. Something they all, that the family line has a hand in. Think of as a hand in. As a hand in is like corporately, think of territories, countries, regions, corporations, businesses, churches. They all have a particular call. Now, they may have many assignments and many mandates, but they have one call, right? We have a call to equip the prophetic. Now, that might look different in all the different things that we do, but that call does not change. It's our destiny. Making sense?
Beginning to. Yeah.
So, what we all have a hand in is a corporate agreement, be it negative and positive, because it's going to be both, because there's always going to be redemption. It's going to be about what the family is called to. So they're all there together in agreement.
Okay.
Wow.
Isn't this a brilliant dream?
Yeah. Well, it really shows, how the bloodline works together, and the different generations too, so you just don't get that picture of them all seated together. You think of generations separating each other, but it's something that goes down the line and it comes together. And sometimes we don't know what the generational line was, what our ancestors were prevalent in, good or bad, So, yeah, this is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and you're right, Jill, because this is the deal. You are going to carry the fruit from the tree from which you fell. So, yes, there are generational attributes, and I don't want to get into the negative part where it's like the physical parts where the doctors are asking, oh, what's in your bloodline, because that's going to carry down. No, let's talk about all the things that God put in us that, yes, will be carried down. So my mother was a prophet. Is there any doubt that I would have a prophetic gifting? I fell off that tree.
Wow.
My father was a minister, preacher. Would there be any doubt that I would look like that as well? So all of those women have attributes that are very similar, yet they're going to look different. I look much different than my mother did in the gifting. I definitely look different than my father did in the gifting.
Yeah.
And that's true of all of us. And from generation to generation, those gifts continue to get passed down through the generational line, and they become stronger from what I understand. Now, Bill Hammond has always said that as they are passed down, they get stronger and stronger from each generation. From generation to generation, those gifts become stronger.
Really?
Interesting.
Yeah.
But you're
No,
still going to look like that tree to some extent. Go ahead, Darla.
well, you can't help but think, oh, what about my sisters and my cousins, my aunts? Where are we and
Right,
who are they? And we can get a
right.
clue. Um,
That's why this is such a brilliant dream,
Wow.
because it relates to every one of us. This is not one of those dreams that you interpret and some people say, oh, yeah, I resonate with that, or oh, yeah, that makes sense, or no, this would resonate with, if they listen to what we're saying, this will resonate with absolutely anyone hearing.
wow. Yes.
Because the truth is the truth in every generation and in every family line.
Yeah. So we have a lot to hope for.
We sure do. We sure do. And this should also provoke us to, like Darla was saying, look at our generational line. Look at, what was your mother prevalent in? What was your father prolific in? What were things that they were gifted in that you can now see, but maybe like your grandmother, your great grandmother, maybe they never realized their true identity, so they absolutely never had the opportunity to step in. They never actually lived that destiny out because they didn't have the belief system and the understanding that we have about what God has clothed us in and what He has given us. Our attributes and our character looks like Him. He is family, He's our Father, and will resemble those that He gifted in the earth that were our ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at your family line, it's like, oh, they were so gifted. They were so gifted in this, and strangely never really walked in that. Never really grabbed that gift and developed it. Yet they had those propensities. They had that bent. So you can see it to some extent. You can see it. It just never maybe was developed, or maybe it was very well developed. One of my ancestors was a very prominent evangelist back in the 40s. I mean, I definitely have an evangelistic attribute. I'm not necessarily an evangelist, but I have those attributes. Think of all the times, girls, that we went out to festivals and Renaissance fairs and psychic fairs and ministered dream interpretation and prophetic words, the heart of God, to all of those people. That's prophetic evangelism.
And interesting, at these particular fairs, what we would not expect to find, well, I didn't know any different, was how hungry they are. They want to know who they are. They want to know what's in their bloodline. Any little thing you bring up is their 100% attention. Their ears are up, their eyes are open, and looking for that open door, whether it be a word in their bloodline or, in their job, their profession, their, in their economy. It's interesting how hungry everybody is. I remember one time, Melody, you made some comment. I was talking to you about a child and not knowing how far to go, how to talk. And you said, everyone wants to know who they are. Everybody wants to know their gift, and how now to have it laid out on the couch, dressed up,
Right?
waiting for that vision to, the television or whatever it is they're doing in front of that TV. So That's very exciting, and so many open doors. You can imagine never-ending doors opening
Right.
when you look at, yeah, in my generation, I have this calling. In my timeline, I have this calling, and it's like calling upon calling and level upon level, and just how exciting. I hope we get through this whole dream. This is just a lot of good stuff.
Well, isn't it easy for us to miss some of those skills and some of those talents that God's put in us that they've not been mined. Isn't that what we do?
Yeah.
We mine. We're
Mhm.
mining for gold in people. And the gold is the gifts, all the gifts.
Mhm.
The gift, yes, the gift of the Spirit, but all of his gifts within us. And we have multiple. We don't have just 9 gifts of the Spirit. That's fruit of the Spirit, whatever. We have many gifts and they all look different. And you get to make the choice as to whether you acknowledge and identify those gifts and whether you develop them. Because how brilliant to be able to activate and operate in what God has put in you, which is just an expression of his attributes and his character, because we are imagers of God.
Mm.
And what an honor.
Yeah.
What a great honor. He's brilliant. He's a genius. We knew that.
Yeah.
Okay, so they were each dressed. Sorry, Joe, were you going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say that, it's so easy to just take things for granted and not recognize them for what they are. And
Yes.
that's the neat thing about the school is, all of that is under observation. And so, you do find out, some of these gifts that you didn't know you had, and how to operate in them to the fullest degree. And, once they're discovered, yes, then to exercise that gift so that it grows. So like these little girls, the pastel colors, they were just beginning. Well, that's kind of how it starts in the school. But, when you get through, you're in the vibrant colors, there's some maturity and growth there. So that's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. I love the way God works with us.
Yeah.
So they were each dressed, all of these women are dressed in the same pretty frilly dresses with crinoline slips. Okay, so let's talk about some more detail. Okay, here's where we begin to see the issue. Now I'm going to go a little bit to the negative here because those issues have to be addressed. Okay, for us to get to the redemption, we have to see and acknowledge and then deal with the opposition, right? So we're beginning to see the issue or the root of these systems that are being displayed. First, they're all wearing the same dress. Again, it's evidence of agreement or commonalities. Second, their attitude seems to be unified, which is affluence. They're all very well dressed with a level of formality. Now, let's talk about formality. Formality speaks of being proper in dress or demeanor, which is like following a line of protocol and can relate to legality. So, we've just seen a root of legalistic religiosity. Think of those crinoline slips. The crinoline slip holds structure to fabric. It causes the fabric to stay within the structure or the shape of the crinoline. Crinoline is like starched, scratchy. There's nothing soft and flexible about it. It is a forcing of the fabric of your dress to be shaped a particular way. And it's puffed up. It's puffed up, puffed out. So it holds the structure in place or shape. In other words, it may depict an element keeping these issues or these elements securely enslaving the females of this bloodline. Legalism, performance. I've got to be perfect. Everybody's dresses, they're all perfect, they're all beautiful, they're all ironed, they're all starched, and they have crinoline slips. Now we're getting some clues as to what's in the bloodline that needs to be dealt with, what the issues are. Now, again, each of their dresses is the same style, but each has a different pastel color. The dresses were lavender, pink, yellow, blue, and green. Here, we might be seeing confirmation in the style, all being the same for each lady, but it can relate to their family traits like we were talking about. We've talked about this, talking about a while ago. While the colors are differing, saying I'm an individual within this line of DNA. But what has come up is legalism. So number one, legalism is an issue that's showing up now because the dresses are forced by the crinoline slips. The crinoline is it's very firm, puffed up. Think of puffed up even as a level of pride. Right? Dressed in your best, yes, but perfection, performance, legalism, perfectionism, think of it that way. Let's look at the colors though, just in a redemptive. Before we go there, do you guys have any ideas on that issue, the issue coming up of the legalism? That's even control and manipulation. There's even a level of control there as well.
So the crinoline, does that have hoops as well?
No, it's not.
That's different.
It's not. Yeah, that was a former period where they literally had little metal rings that were sewn on to a petticoat that went under, and it did the same thing. This is just fabric, but think of fabric. It's like a very thick lace. It's a mesh that is starched, and it has this form to it, and it's completely stiff.
Yeah, I was thinking of how uncomfortable that would be up against your skin, that it would not be very comfortable either. So it's
horrible.
they are being forced into this through probably some kind of programming or training,
There you go.
How your parents trained you. You sit at the table, you're seen and not heard, that type of thing. And
right.
So yeah, it's very
like
much
family culture, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Very interesting. So now we're getting down to nitty gritty. All right. But let's look at the redemptive colors before we go on of the dresses. So lavender's healing. It brings peace, calm, tranquility. I think Jill has some other notes on that as well. Pink, let's talk about pink. Pink speaks of innocence. And again, it depicts the feminine nature, that innocence, and that's for the whole body of Christ, right? You don't have to be female to wear pink in the spirit, because that's about your innocence. Yellow is about favor, about the gifts. Remember, we've been talking about the gifts, and all of these related women have gifts that relate and tie into one another, but are not necessarily the same. Blue. Now, blue is known to reflect calm and represent revelation knowledge. What if the dream itself is the revelation knowledge being given to the dreamer? There's a clue, right? Then green often speaks of something fresh, new, the beginning. Isn't this the overall outcome of God speaking through the dream? Something can come of this because the message is important enough that he gave this dream. And he gave this dream in a very significant way, which I will share later. What do you guys think about that?
Well, those are all gifts of the Spirit. So, yeah, they would work in tandem with each other. And so, yeah, each one is pretty important. And I wouldn't be surprised if they, like you said, they don't overlap, because they are tied in with sisters, that's part of the bloodline. So some might work better in one color or the other, but they all kind of intertwine. Sort of like the rainbow colors, when you see the bow in the sky, those colors all are vibrant and they all work together. And they're known as a rainbow, as a one unit. So
right. Exactly. And if, like the eggs or the Easter thought, if they represent all of these different visions or giftings, this gets very interesting, doesn't it? Looking at each of the individuals sitting on the sofa on display. They're all on display.
Yeah.
They're dressed to be exhibited. They're all on display. So they're seated and they're facing the wall with the television. The television is not even on, but yes, we know television is like tell-a-vision. So it's revelatory. It can be revelatory knowledge, but their view is the vision. But the vision is not turned on, not activated.
Oh, that's good.
Their visions individually and corporately are not yet activated, right? So they're experiencing, and the dreamer says it's on the wall. We're faced toward the wall where the television was. Wall is going to be an obstacle, something that holds you back, a boundary of some sort. This beginning to tie into what the enemy has put up to affect and to shut down the giftings of each of these women, because they haven't been activated.
Right.
Then she says, you guys have anything on that?
No, that was really good. The blank wall, the blank screen, no vision.
Right.
Yeah. Not very, very much to go on. I mean, that would be kind of a depressing place to be.
Right.
No,
it's void.
Yeah.
Right. It's void.
Right.
Empty.
Well,
So
and I think,
go ahead, Darla. Sorry.
as I'm looking, trying to get everything personally out of this dream, as if it were our own, which is a good way to look at them.
Sure.
Is it fair to say I don't see these wonderful attributes colored, maybe represented by these colors, but yet there's that flip side to something as well. So if we see, rather than maybe the pink, the feminine, innocent, greatly loved, we see an angry, bitter little girl with her fists up all the time. Can we get a clue of the right gift, but maybe not having been educated or having been, as you said, activated properly in the gift? Or maybe that's where you're going with all this. I don't know.
I'm not sure if I'm answering the question. I'm not sure if I understand the question. But yes, remember, there's always going to be a redemptive and a negative side. So the negative is going to be void of the knowledge of the redemption, which is everything that Jesus appropriated for us because of the Father's love, right? Mm-hmm. So yes, absolutely. That sort of a little girl with her fists up and, that sort of bitter, angry, that can also be, a form of rebellion where I don't trust anybody. I'm putting up walls. I'm fighting for my rights. I'm fighting for what is mine, who I am. And they don't even have an understanding of their identity, right? But that tenacity is still part of their gifting. It just hasn't been redeemed.
Okay.
The fight is still part of the gifting. It just hasn't yet been redeemed.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Did that answer your question?
It did, because a lot of times we'll see the negative and then somebody will say, oh, sweet, feminine, like maybe a prophet would come along and say, look at all this stuff. But yet by every visual and obvious account, it's dead opposite. So I just like that. I think that's a good thing to have in our minds, is to know that we can get a clue of their giftings, even if it is by.
Oh, absolutely. I see what you're saying. Absolutely. However, that the prophet is going to prophesy to the recipient's potential. God always prophesies to their potential. He calls out their potential. He doesn't call out their flaws, right?
Okay.
Because that would be condemnation, and that's not who he is. So he's not publicly gonna call you out on the carpet and tell everybody your flaws. That's not a prophetic word from a true prophet, a prophet that is speaking the heart of God. The heart of God is always going to speak to their potential, because he's calling their potential out so that it is activated, and it becomes activated through the words of the prophet or the prophecy that God sends, which calls that potential out, calling them who they truly are.
Yeah, the good news.
Calling out their truth. Go ahead, Darla.
I said the good news.
Yeah, the good news. The good news. Okay, so to the right of the TV was the front door. Now, this is going to represent, an opportunity. Think of it as an open door, an opportunity for natural change, because it's to the right of the television. So for the family, they're getting offered natural change. Now, it's also going to go both. It's going to go both positive and negative. You're going to see that again, because so what God's offering is a shift in the family system. And it also tells us that the message here is for the families present and future because it's the front door. Right?
Yeah.
So the context and the content of the dream itself is the message, which is a 411 to the family members for a shift in the family system, that family culture we were just talking about. Does that make sense?
No,
So
say
the
that
door is
again.
open. Go ahead, Darla.
No, that I was just saying, say that again. That was
The dream, the content of the dream is literally the message, the
okay.
revelation, or the message, which is a 411 to the family line, the women in this family line, because that's who God's speaking to cause or provoke a shift in the family system and system programming and culture.
Okay.
He's offering change. Isn't that what God always does? He will always offer change.
Yes. Absolutely. And it's our choice.
Absolutely. And he hopes we will take it. But the deal is, you can dream a dream, but if you never understand the dream, what good did dreaming the dream do you?
Not much.
Not much. So we see. And I left everything in the order exactly the way the dreamer gave it to me. Hi, Kelly. Exactly the way she gave it to me. I didn't want to change anything from her original sharing the dream. Kelly's asking, does the awareness help to facilitate receiving change? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That's what we're saying. If you are unaware of the situation, then what good did the message do? If you never figure out what the message is, if you cannot assimilate the message, if you get a letter in the mail but it's about an inheritance, but you never open the envelope and you never read it, you'll never know you have an inheritance, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the same with blind spots too, things in yourself that you don't see because it's so close to you. And unless it's pointed out, lots of times you don't even know you're operating in those anything negative, because you're just you're not seeing it.
Right.
And other people may think it's hypocrisy, but lots of times people just don't know that they're operating that way. So yeah, you need those revelation,
Yeah,
to bring it about.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Darla, did you have a thought on that? Where'd we go?
No, whoops. We here? We good?
I don't
No,
know how
I'm,
to do this. Can you get us all back on the screen again? Hope I didn't mess something up.
let's see.
You work on that and all. So the dreamer turns around on the sofa. There we go. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So the dreamer turned around on the sofa. Again, I'm reiterating, I wrote the dream down exactly the way it was told to me because sometimes that is significant. Not always, but sometimes it is significant. So follow me here. So the turning is important here. Why is it important? Because the dreamer has to turn around to make another decision. In other words, she's making a choice to look at what is behind her. And that is going to require looking toward her past, right? Otherwise, she does not have a clear view of the opposition, which is what the whole issue has been the whole time.
Right.
So if these women had no idea what was going on, and they can't acknowledge, as Kelly said, they cannot acknowledge the opposition and deal with it, then how will they get freedom and actually walk in the giftings that God has given them? Does that make sense?
Yes.
So when she turns around, because she saw something in her periphery, her peripheral vision, she notices 5 puppets / marionettes coming down the stairs toward the sofa. I know you guys are like, "Whoa, that's creepy." That's creepy. Well, the number 5 is showing up again. You got 5 dresses. You got 5 women. You got 5 marionettes. I think Jill said earlier that the marionettes could tie into each of the women. Yes, absolutely. This time it's confirming the number affected by the issue. There were 5 women sitting on the sofa. There were 5 women affected by these issues, and each one was tied to one of the marionettes. Now, marionettes are being controlled and manipulated by a puppeteer or a puppet. Would you call them, Jill, a puppet master, right?
Right. Yep.
So you might at this point be asking, what's the issue? Well, there's a very big clue here, because marionettes coming out of the upper floor is going to be connected to mindsets. The upper floors are going to be connected to mindsets, and also second heaven. They can be connected to second heaven, or soulish issues. And we're also seeing the puppet strings are part of, and the word marionette is actually used in one of the vows for the Freemasonry.
Ooh.
That's,
I know that.
we're getting into the root of the system, aren't we?
Oh yeah.
This is the system that's behind the issues and behind the programming. It's also the system that's somewhat misogynistic and holds the women in their place with their stiff slips on and dressed in their pretty frilly dresses, looking perfect, being quiet unless they're spoken to, as one of, I guess Jill said that. Yep. So after interviewing the dreamer, I find, yes, there's a strong presence of the Masonic in the bloodline, and the Masonic spirit always seeks to control, especially women. You guys have some ideas here? There's a big clue. That's the big clue. That's the big reveal.
Yeah, you want to say, run. Get out the door. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Well, you need to get free of those strings, that's for sure. And because that's all manipulation and control. And
absolutely.
Since it's done through the bloodline, that definitely needs to be taken out. Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember my grandfather was 33rd Order Masonic, and I had recurring dreams. I've shared this before, but I've had recurring dreams, well, all my life, actually. I had recurring dream. It was the same dream, but I had it all my life till I was in my 40s, probably early to mid 40s. And the dream was that I was being chased by a group of people. I knew that when they caught me, they were going to inject me with something that was going to paralyze me, yet I was still going to be awake. They were going to torture, rape, and kill me as a sacrifice, a Luciferian sacrifice.
Wow.
And these dreams terrified me my whole life. Now, I was born in 1956, so there were no date rape drugs when I was a kid. So I couldn't have known about the effect of those drugs any other way but by the Spirit of the Lord. But I have had that particular repetitive dream all my life. Now, one day in my 40s, I was worshiping the Lord, and I was worshiping with a silver sword, a replica of a silver sword, large, heavy. And the Lord told me to pick it up and to do this, like it was like a war dance. It was like, this huge sword. And I was doing this crazy, just by the Spirit. I didn't even know what I was doing. And I got so tired, I could hardly hold the weight of the sword up any longer. I sat down and I was just praying and asking the Lord, what just happened? And he said, we just cut the marionette strings from the Masonic.
Wow.
That is awesome.
I never had that dream again, ever.
Wow. That's awesome.
See, your dreams can bring a lot of healing too. And if you watch them and you watch God's communication through them, you can see what he's doing in the content of your dreams. Because I never had that dream again.
So it wasn't the smart thing to run. The smart thing would be turn and face and chop those strings, because that was, like I said, my first instinct was, get out of there. But
yes,
how much better to allow the Spirit of the Lord to walk you through the fight.
Exactly. So we'll go exactly where you're going, Darla. That's next up. So these marionettes were so frightening to her that she began screaming and ran out the front door. Okay, so another symptom of the system that they've been operating under, that they were raised under, which is the Masonic, is a demonic outcome of the system set up through the Masonic in the family line: fear and intimidation. Yep. Fear leads to neglect of responsibility and will cause you to retreat. Those areas where your psychologist or your psychoanalyst would say you are in that stage of fight or flight. This is that. When you don't know what you're seeing and you don't know that you can cut those strings, you run out of the fear that has been established in the system through the bloodline. So fear had become a stronghold in the system, in the family line, because of the system of the Masonic, which is control and manipulation. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Wow.
Wow. So she had to turn and see what was in her past bloodline upstairs in order to even know what to do.
Now, she still ran out of fear, but this is the deal. In the context of the dream, the running, that particular aspect of the scenario in the dream shows us that one of the strongholds in the bloodline is fear. She didn't know she had a fight in her.
No.
All these women have a fight in them, but they didn't know it.
Ah.
Right? So let's look back at just some of the content of the dream and seeing what's been highlighted to the dreamer. So we saw legalism and religiosity, which leads to performance rather than relationship, right?
Mhm.
God's about relationship. He's not about your performance. He's not forcing you to perform. That would be religion. And legalism. That would not be God. That would not be the heart of God. Being stiff and unmovable, like the crinoline slip, is also a level of pride or being puffed up.
Yeah.
And then you've got number 3, fear of man instead of God. Fear of the ghosties and the monsters upstairs rather than of God and trusting his power over everything in your life. So those are the 3 issues that are from the root system of the Masonic: legalism, pride, fear. Those are huge attributes that are within the system of the Masonic. They're huge. And they're very common. They're common in every family line connected to the Masonic. So this dream, you can see, has a call to action. What's that action going to be? That action's going to be the dreamer needs to repent, forgive, and renounce these discovered issues and receive and declare God's heart and purpose for the family line as well as her own life. And if anything else comes up while she's doing it, then she would want to go with that as well. And I would say to you, listeners, if any of this is resonating with you, I would say to you to take these actions as well. Repent, forgive, and renounce. Don't forget to forgive yourself for coming into that agreement, having a hand in a system that is based on Luciferianism.
Yeah.
You can listen back through the podcast and you can take notes, clear out these issues and these areas, any others that the Lord brings up, Holy Spirit speaks to you about, and clear them out of your life and your generational line. God is faithful, and that's why he gives these messages. You gals want to interject anything there before I go on?
I was also thinking that since the other 4 did not turn around, that maybe there's also an issue where once they make up their mind, they're not easily changed. There's no negotiation there. So that probably would fall under pride also, but just the idea of they're not easily moved. So
Not willing maybe to look at what may be not only a past, but traumatic aspects of life that might bring up pain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And if we are not willing to lay all of that before the Lord and allow him to sift the gold out of the issues and the programming and the systems in our lives, then that is pride. It's also rebellion, which is considered witchcraft. Rebellion, rebelling against your maker. Anything else? Okay, so you guys are going to love this. Just to let you know how pertinent this dream actually is to this family, this is the history of the dream. Two sisters, follow me. Two sisters had this dream the same night in 1964. The older sister was 12 years old, and the younger sister was 7 years old at the time of the dream. Now, each of them woke up, went into the kitchen, and told their mother about the dream that they had that night without the knowledge of the other sister telling the same dream with the very same details. So to both of these sisters, the 7-year-old and the 12-year-old in 1964, had the very same dream with exactly the same details in the same night.
Wow.
Tell me God wasn't talking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Now you're going to love this too, and I'll close with this. 1964 in the Greek means to swear falsely.
Mm.
That's about false identity, knowing who you are, swearing upon yourself. Now there's also a swearing or a vow or a vowing in the Masonic. Look at this. 1964 in Hebrew means a palace or a temple. Where do the Freemasons meet? In a Masonic
In a temple. Yep. Wow.
12, the age of the older sister, governmental authority. This is what God is telling the dreamer in the dream to begin to walk in, governmental authority.
12 is also an age of accountability too, usually.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. Then 7, the younger sister's age, is covenant, and it's also completion. It's the why of the message. The covenant is the why. It's the purpose of the message.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Pretty amazing.
How brilliant is God? How brilliant is God? Only God can do this stuff. You can't make this stuff up.
Wow.
And what's very interesting is this dream came to the older sister and the younger sister in 1964. Both of them had the same dream with exactly the same details. They tell their mother separately, and the mother says, your sister just told me she had this dream. They both had the same dream. But do you know when it got interpreted? About 6 months ago.
Wow.
All these years.
Yeah.
I interpreted the dream about 6 months ago. If that. So they've had this message, this letter in hand all their lives, almost, and had no idea what the letter said.
Wow.
Is that amazing?
Yeah, it blows your mind.
Wow.
God is so out there. He can do anything.
Yes.
And sometimes things are literally about timing. Were this context or the message of this dream, this message brought up in 1964, do you think any of those women would have been able to assimilate any of it? No. And apparently not even until this year.
Wow, wow, wow.
We love God. He is a mystery. He continues to be a mystery. Well, I know you guys really enjoyed this dream. We enjoyed it. I loved interpreting it and was so excited when I heard the dream. It was crazy. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing, subscribing, whatever, liking. We just love you, and we'll see you next week. Don't forget to write your dreams down.